This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So today I want to continue the exception handling session part two. Sorry, anyone have any question? Okay, so I want to continue the exception handling session. In the previous session, we saw how to handle system faults. Is my voice clear? Not clear? Can you check? My voice is not clear?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Clear only, right? Anyone have a trouble? Let me know if you have trouble. Okay, so guys, in the previous session we discussed about system faults. So system faults means due to environment related issues, like when we are calling an external service, network issue, external service is down, external server is down, these kind of things. These are all be considered as system faults. But there is one important fault, that is business fault, or we can also call it as custom fault. Okay, this is the one. Or sometimes we call it as user defined faults. Okay, so we can also define and throw business faults or custom faults. I will tell you the entire process how we can do this business faults. Okay, so especially we use business faults. Vikram, Venkat and Kaja, are you able to hear me? Looks like Vikram is not able to hear me. Vikram, can you rejoin? Vikram, can you please rejoin?
Sir, I'm hearing you, sir, perfectly.
Yeah. Samaya, how about you? Are you able to hear me? Okay. So, okay, let's get back. So we are talking about business faults, right? So we use this business fault concept whenever we want to handle functional related faults. Let's assume in an ATM center, I discussed this example in the previous session as well. In an ATM center, we will get an option to enter 4-digit PIN. Okay, customer can enter any 4 digits. Okay, he can enter integers, 4 integers, but 4-digit PIN, if customer enter any integer, it is not a proper password. Customer has to enter the valid password, correct? Suppose assume customer entered an invalid password, some random number he entered, that will not be considered as password, and your ATM center will show you an error. This password is not correct. Please type the proper password, something like that, right? So entered integer is not a wrong integer. Okay, the password, customer entered 4-digit integer, but that 4-digit should match the password which is in the database. In that case only the password is allowed. If the customer entered a different integer, that will not be considered. But number wise, it is a number, it's a good number. Okay, let's assume customer entered 1234. 1234 is a number, no doubt in that, but it may not be the password of that ATM card. Okay, so in this case we need to consider this as a business fault, and I want to display a message. Okay, to handle the functional things, to handle functional violations, we can use this business fault concept. Okay, not the system faults are different. System faults are due to environmental issues, but business fault is very close to our functionality, our requirement. Negative cases we handle by using business faults. Okay, so to configure the business fault, we need to do some set of steps we need to configure. Okay, for system fault, what we did for system fault, okay, what we did, we configured a catch branch. catch all branch, correct? Catch all branch, logic inside catch all branch, catch all branch. This is what we did to handle the system faults. But okay, so by using system faults, we did two-step configuration, catch and catch all branch configuration. And second step is some logic. You can design any logic inside the catch all branch. You can see this example. What we did here, if you go back to order processing system, you can observe your card validation system scope. Here we configured catch branch and catch all branch, some business logic inside the catch branch, some business logic. Okay, it can be any kind of business logic. It's not just assign activity. Here you can configure sending an email notification, calling an external web service, insert the error information in a table, anything you can do. Okay, so this is the step required. But in the system fault, observe guys, we are not doing anything to raise the fault. We are not doing any specific configuration to raise the fault. Okay, so I mean it's a system it's an issue with the infrastructure or the environment. Something is wrong, something is not as expected in the infrastructure or the environment, then the program itself, your server and program will take care to raise the error. Once the error raised, you did this configuration. Once the error raised, is the catch branch or the catch all branch will catch the error and execute the logic which you designed. Okay, but if you talk about business fault, it has two parts, part 1 and part 2. Okay, so in part 1 we need to do how to raise the error, okay. In part 2, how to handle error, Are we good? So two things we need to do here. So in the system fault, it is only part 2. We did only part 2. Okay, we don't do anything related to part 1. Part 1 we did not configure anything related to part 1. It's the system, your server and your program will take care. If any error raised, that error will be thrown. Okay, once the error thrown, we do only part 2. We will handle the error. But in business fault, not just handling the error, you also need to configure how to raise the error. Okay, how to raise the error also you need to do. But in system faults, we need to take care about how to raise the error. It's not required. Okay, fine. So here two steps we need to do, right? Part 1, part 2. So part 1, what we need to do, how to raise the error. For this, guys, we need an XSD. We need one XSD. Okay, and then we need to define, I will say, one fault XSD structure, Number 2, this is in WSDL. This is a WSDL configuration. We need define message for XSD. We defined the XSD, right? In previous step, we defined one XSD, and for that XSD, I want a message. Define message for XSD, and then define fault parameter in operation. Define fault parameter in operation. Okay, and then we need a variable, a message type variable in beeple. Okay, and then configure throw activity in beeple as per logic. Where you want to raise the business fault, at that specific place we want this. Okay, and then okay, configure throw activity in beeple as per logic, and define and throw. Fine, this is fine. I will show you when we are doing. I will show you. Done. Okay. So these are all the steps to raise a business fault. If you want to throw one business fault, these are all the steps you need to follow. Okay. And then how to handle it? Handling the fault, how to handle the fault is the same process even for system faults and business faults. See, the same process I need to use here. Either use the catch branch or catch all branch and logic inside the catch and catch all branch. Are we good? So this is how you need to define a business fault. Okay, let me quickly do all the steps. All the steps I will do one by one. Let me go to my JDeveloper. The first step is we need to define an XSD. See guys, even for system faults, we got a WSDL. We got a WSDL which contains a message with a contract, right? Same process we need to do here for system faults as well. But system fault I want to implement in card validation system, guys. Let me pick a requirement. I will go to card validation system. What I want to do is let's implement one small requirement here. If the credit card vendor is not Visa, if the credit card vendor is not Visa, I want to consider I want to consider this use case as business fault. Okay, you remember the card validation system request, right? See the request in the card validation system. I want to implement the business fault logic when credit card vendor is not Visa. I want to consider it as business fault. Okay, it's very simple. So I hope you understand the requirement part. Okay, what I want to do, I want to implement a business fault when the credit card vendor is not Visa. Okay, right. Let's come back to your card validation system people process. So first step is we need to define an XSD. I want to define one XSD for my fault structure. So what I will do, where is the CVS DeepL XSD? It is in the design time MDS. Go to your design time MDS, card validation system, XSD document. Guys, it is your choice. Either you can define the new XSD within the existing XSD document, or you can define an XSD completely as a new document. It is just your choice. Okay. Either you can define the XSD within the existing document, or you can define the XSD in a new document. There is no restriction. It is completely your choice. Okay. Now let me create one new XSD here to handle my fault structure. System fault also contains a fault structure, right? Fault XML. Similarly, for the custom faults also, we want to define a fault structure. So what I will do, fault schema. Okay, I'm just giving some my own structure code, my fault code, fault name, fault message. Okay, I just want to define one structure. That's it. Okay, it is the fault code, fault name, fault message. A new XSD I defined. Okay, step 1 completed. Step 1 completed. Now I want to perform step 2. I want to define a message in XSD doc. Define a message in WSDL for this XSD. Okay. So now go back to your WSDL. Where is your card validation WSDL? It's in MDS. Go to your WSDL. You need to open your WSDL document. You need to open your WSDL document and define one new XSD. Sorry, one new message. We already have an import statement here. Observe. We already have an import statement for our XSD document. Suppose if you are defining another document, another XSD document, then you need to import the XSD document into this WSDL. You got me? If you define XSD in a new XSD document, then you need to import the XSD. I mean, you need to have a separate import statement in WSDL. As of now, I did not define my XSD in the new document. I'm reusing the existing XSD document for the new XSD. Okay. Now go back to your WSDL. You no need to import the XSD because we already have the import statement. You just concentrate on creating a new message section. Okay, what I will do, I will create a new message. I will create a new message. I will give a name for this message. I will say business fault message. Okay, business fault message, and the XSD name. What is our XSD name? Fault schema. Provide the XSD name. So we got a message. Okay, this is a new message. Now go to your operation. You know WSDL syntax. We discussed in the WSDL syntax. Under the operation, we can define input, output, and a fault parameter as well. And you can have multiple fault parameters inside the operation. Okay, multiple fault parameters are allowed. Name is equal to and message is equal to. Guys, message is equal to, you need to give the name of the fault message. What is our fault message? Business fault message, correct? So the qualifier, client is the qualifier here, colon the message name. So this is our fault message. Okay, and here name, you can define the name. See, system faults, we saw the system fault name, right? Remote fault, binding fault, these are all the system fault names, different types of system faults. Similar way, you can provide a meaningful name for your custom fault or the business fault as well. You can give any name. It's a user defined keyword. You can say your fault name is XYZ. It is always suggestible. Provide the meaningful name. I want to say invalid vendor, invalid CC, let's say. I want to say this as invalid CC fault. Okay, this is my fault name. It is user defined keyword, guys. Name is user defined, and of course you can define any number of faults in your operation. I will say XYZ fault. Okay, because the first, as per syntax, you remember the syntax, right? In the WSDL class we discussed the syntax is one WSDL contain multiple port types. Each port type contain multiple operations. Each operation contains input, output, and multiple fault parameters. This is the syntax we discussed in the WSDL session. Okay, so as of now, in my example, I defined two faults under the operation. Of course, I'm going to use this one. I don't use this XYZ fault, but I just want to show you. Just for your understanding purpose, I defined the second fault. It is not at all required. The second one is not at all required for the current requirement. Done? Okay, so we are ready with the XSD. We are ready with the WSDL. Okay, now go back to your card validation system, people. Here, what I want to do, I want to implement the logic. See, this part is done. Step 1, fault structure is done, WSDL is done. Now I need to go to people and I need to do the step 3 or step C. Okay, a message type variable in people. I want to define a variable here, guys. Okay, I will do that variable. Before that, let me implement something. I want to create a scope activity. I just want to create a scope activity. Okay, and I want to pull the if logic. We already have an if logic here, right? This logic, I want to pull it inside the scope. Okay, it's not mandatory. I just want to make it a small group, small logic. Okay, a local scope I want to build. I just made it, right? So now what I want to do, if the card, we want to implement the logic. If the vendor is not Visa, I want to consider this as error. Okay, so the entire scope, I will keep an if condition. Okay, and I will move the scope into the first if branch. Okay, so now I will consider the first if branch for Visa vendor and else branch is non-Visa vendor. Okay, so what I will do, see this, I just set the label Visa and this is non-Visa. Anything not Visa, if anything not Visa, we need to consider the case as business fault. We'll do that anyway. Let me check the if condition. What is the if condition? If it is Visa or not, that I need to see. Vendor is equal to Visa. Okay, if the vendor is Visa, control goes to this branch. Control goes to this branch. If vendor is not Visa, control goes to this branch. Okay, vendor is Visa, control goes to this branch where we have our regular logic. Okay, I mean, see guys, this scope activity is just, I want to make it simple. That's it. I mean, it's not mandatory. Suppose you are not comfortable with the scope activity, you don't need to maintain the scope activity. See, I will show you even that. If branch, I will move it out of the scope activity. Of course, you can remove it if you don't want, not an issue, guys. I just want to show you, uh, I want to keep the logic in one scope. That's it. It's not mandatory to have a scope activity. Now, if you see, we have one if condition which contains our previous logic. This is our old if condition. Old if condition where we are checking valid branch, invalid branch, valid CC branch and invalid CC branch. Okay. So this is our old logic. I pulled this logic into our new if condition, Visa branch. And the condition here is if the CC vendor is Visa, if the CC vendor is Visa, allow the logic. If the CC vendor is not Visa, control goes to else branch. Control goes to else branch. Here I want to implement my business fault. How to implement the business fault, I will show you. I just made some change in my logic. Okay. Now, what is the next step, sir? We are looking for a variable. We are looking for a message type variable. Let's go to your JDeveloper. Create a new variable. Create a new variable. Okay. I want to give a name. I want to give a name fault variable. Fault variable. Okay. And go to the message type. Browse the message type. Your message type is in MDS, guys. Your WSDL is in MDS. Okay. Your WSDL is in MDS. Check your WSDL. People request message. See, this is the business fault message which we defined in our WSDL. Okay, see this project WSDL files. Project WSDL files here. It will refer the local files within your project. If any WSDL is there, you can refer here. If your project don't contains the WSDL and your WSDL is in MDS, you need to access that through your partner link only. Okay. So suppose other than partner link, what is the other option you have? Project WSDL. I mean, but WSDL must be within your project card validation system. But actually, our WSDL is not within the card validation system. So we are going to partner link and browse the WSDL. Okay. Anyway, what is the message type we want? We want a business fault message. So I defined a fault variable by using business fault message. It's a message type variable. Then our variable is ready. Our variable is ready. Okay. Now what I want to do in this scope, in this else branch, I want to consider this case. I mean, if the flow comes to else branch, it's a business fault. This is what I want to consider. So what I will do, I will drag drop and assign activity here, and I want to load some data in my fault variable. I want to load some data in my fault variable. Let me configure some data because it's a business fault. We only configure the data. System fault, in case of system fault, we saw the fault structure, correct? We saw the fault structure in the instance, but that fault structure is not defined by us. The fault data is not defined by us. System will take care. But business fault, in case of business fault, we need to take care. What is the name of the business fault? What is the structure of fault data? What is the data should be there in the fault variable? All this information we only, I mean, as a developer, we only need to configure it. Okay. Let me say fault code. I want to say fault code is 1001. I'm just giving my own fault code. Okay. This is my fault code. And fault name. I want to say this fault name as we already have the fault name, right? What is the fault name? Invalid CC fault. Okay, and I just want to hard code invalid CC name as my fault name. Invalid CC fault. And the fault message. Okay, I will give a meaningful message. Provided vendor is invalid. Provided vendor is invalid. Okay, some fault message, that's it. So my own fault structure, and my own fault data entirely for business fault. My own fault structure for business fault, my own fault data for business fault. That's it. Okay. Now what we need to do, the next step is we need to configure an activity called throw activity. It's a new activity, guys. We need to configure an activity called throw activity. So drag drop the throw activity after assign. Okay, here you can configure a throw activity. Here you can configure a throw activity. So to configure the throw activity, it means we are raising the fault. By using throw activity, we are raising the fault. Okay, let's browse the fault name. Click on the browse button and your fault name. You can go to WSDL. We defined the fault in the WSDL, right? Go to partner links and here you can see the WSDL. See the fault names. We defined two faults in our WSDL, invalid CC fault and XYZ fault. We need to go with the invalid CC fault. Say okay. So this is the fault my throw activity will raise. And what is the fault variable? We already defined a variable and we loaded some data in this variable. Just browse this variable. Okay, now what happened? This is this entire logic we are using to throw a fault. Okay, once you throw the fault, that must be handled by catch and catch all. See, throw activity till this point we are done how to raise the error. Now we need to concentrate how to handle the error. To handle the error, it is the same process what we did for system faults. Okay, we need to configure the catch and catch all branch and some logic inside the catch branch. Okay, so let me do some required logic to handle this. Okay, so guys, this throw activity throws the fault and it will search for a scope. It will search for a scope. If you see, our entire card validation system contains only one scope, that is global scope. So now what happened? This fault will be raised and it will search for a scope and there is no local scope. So control goes to your global scope. So this fault is expecting a catch or catch all branch at global scope. Okay, at global scope. Otherwise, if you are interested to handle as a local scope, yes, you can do that. Just drag drop a scope activity here. Okay, before your if branch, and drag the entire if branch inside to this scope. Okay, then what happened? You have local scope and global scope. Now observe, this is your local scope and this is your global scope. Now what happened? This throw activity, when it raises a fault, first it will check for catch and catch all branch at the local scope, and then it will check the catch and catch all branch at the global scope. Are we good? Any question? The hierarchy also you need to understand. Always local scope has high priority, and if local scope exists but no catch and catch all branch exist. Local scope exists, but there is no catch branch and catch all branch configured, then the control goes to global scope as well. In the global scope, it will check for catch branch and catch all. And if the global scope also don't contain catch and catch all, then the error throw to WebLogic server and WebLogic server terminates your process. Okay. Any questions as of now? Any questions? No. Okay. So let me configure a catch branch here. Of course, you can go for catch all as well. If you go for catch all, you no need to configure a specific fault name here. Catch all branch is for all faults. Okay. I don't want to go for catch all. What I will do, I will configure catch branch, very specific catch branch. Okay. So just click on catch branch. So now what happened? This is the catch branch. And I want to configure the catch branch. In the catch branch, we need to specify which error we want to handle. Okay, just browse the fault name. This time our fault name is not system fault. This time our fault name is a business fault. Business fault defined in the WSDL. Go to your WSDL. Which fault you want to catch? XYZ fault or invalid CC? So our throw activity, by using throw activity, we configured invalid CC fault. Just catch the fault, and of course you can use the same variable, guys. We have a variable, right? We have a variable. Either you can use this variable Either you can use this variable, okay, what is that? Fault variable. You can use this variable in your catch branch just to manage the variables. If you want to avoid multiple variables, you can use the same variable. Otherwise, you can create a new variable as well, not an issue. See here, I want to say invalid CC fault variable. I'm defining a new variable. Observe, I just define a new variable and it is a message type variable. Browse the message type. Browse the message type. So this is the same message type we need to maintain. Okay, done. So now what happened? This throw activity, throw the fault. This throw activity, throw a fault called invalid CC along with a fault variable. This fault variable already loaded with some data. This fault variable already loaded with some data. Okay, so once the throw activity throw the fault, once the throw activity throws the fault, this catch branch is looking for the same fault. So this catch branch catches the fault and copy the data. Whatever data we have in this variable, the data will be copied into invalid CC fault variable. The data will be copied. So generally, how we copy the data from one variable to another variable? By using an assign activity or by using a transform activity. But here we are not using any assign activity and transform activity. Observe, like a system fault, business fault also use the catch branch. It will catch the fault. It will catch the fault, whichever we specified. It will also catch the data, fault data, and stores the data in this variable. Okay, it stores the data. See, we hard coded the data in a different variable. What is the different variable? It is fault variable. The name of the variable is fault variable. Okay, so this variable loaded with data. But once the catch branch executed, this catch branch catches the fault along with the fault data. Whatever fault data we feed it in the other variable will be copied into this variable, invalid CC fault variable. Okay, I just want to show you that practice, how that is behaving. Okay, just say okay. Now inside catch branch you can design some business logic. What I will do, I will say so card is not a valid card, not a invalid card. Card is error. Okay, it's an error card. We want to consider this use case as error. So go to your output variable. I want to say CC status as error. CC status as error, and or we'll do one thing. CC status not error. I will copy the data from the fault variable. We want to see the fault variable data, right? So we have second fault variable. See, this is first fault variable which we defined, and this is the second fault variable defined in the catch branch. I want to get something from here. I will say fault name. I want to copy the fault name data from invalid CC fault variable and copy this into CC status. I just want to show you how this CC status, how this logic is behaving, how this variable is behaving, invalid CC fault variable. Done. Say okay. So we are done. We are done with the logic. See, if the card is Visa, regular business logic will be executed. If the card is not Visa, control goes to else branch and we are raising a fault. Once we raise the fault, control check the scope activity. Within the scope activity, is there any catch branch or not? In the catch, if we have catch branch, that logic will be executed. Are we good? Are we good? Done. Save it. Save it. What I will do, let's deploy the code. I want to test this code and I want to show you how this is behaving. So guys, to test this code, you need to deploy two things. You need to deploy MDS and you need to deploy the card validation system. Two things you need to deploy because our MDS contains changes. We made a change in the XSD, we made a change in the WSDL, so you need to deploy your MDS as well. Make sure all the dependencies are correct in your MDS or not. If I go to project properties, deployment, and edit the deployment profile, in the deployment profile, go to filters, make sure card validation system included or not. See, card validation system, billing system, both are included here. If you want, you can consider it. You can keep the billing system. If you don't want, you can delete the billing system. I mean, you can uncheck the billing system project. Okay. I want to deploy only card validation system, so I selected card validation system checkboxes. Say okay. And now go to your application level, and check the deployment profile once again. Application level deployment profile, edit it, check the dependencies. Design time MDS, yes, it is selected. Design time MDS, deployment profile is selected, so we are good. Now deploy your MDS first. First, I want to deploy my MDS. If you don't deploy MDS, your program will not work, guys, because you have changes in your MDS. I mean XSD and Visible. Then is the deployment completed? We need to wait. Once the deployment completed, we can look into the card validation system. We can deploy the card validation system. Okay. Yeah, MDS deployment finished. So I want to deploy my card validation system. Before that, save everything and then deploy your card validation system project. See, I'm using 1.0 version. Deploy, finish. So I'm deploying this. Let's go to your enterprise manager, go to Sova Infra. We need to wait for a few seconds until the deployment completed. Okay, I think it is over. No. Okay, build success, doing the deployment. Okay, deployment finished. So we are able to deploy our card validation system project. Okay, now just test this service. How we can test this service? Go to your card validation system SOAP UI client. If you submit the request, see this, we are expecting a response here. Okay, in the SOAP UI, I submitted the request. If you see the response, we got the valid response. It's the regular flow. We got the valid response, right? Suppose if it is not Visa, I provided some other card, let's say Master. I provided a MasterCard. Okay, then what is the expectation? This use case must be considered as invalid vendor, so it should throw the fault. Okay, let's submit the request. If I submit the request, observe this, the response is invalid CC fault. Okay, the response is invalid CC fault. Give me a second, guys. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, so this is the invalid CC fault which we raised, right? Let's go to the instance and verify. Go to the latest instance. I tested this program 2 times today, and we need to pick the latest instance to see the fault execution, how the business fault executed. Taking time. Okay, so we have 2 instances for today. Let me take the latest one. In the latest one, we are expecting the business fault flow. Go to the people process. See the people process, control went into else branch. Because this is not the Visa. Vendor is not Visa. So we assigned a data in a variable. Called fault variable, and then throw the fault. See the fault name. See, this is the structure. Observe the structure. For system faults, for system fault also, we saw this kind of structure. Okay, so similarly, so the same structure we are getting even for the business fault. Okay, similar structure, and but this is our variable. Okay, of the data, whatever we loaded into our variable. See, observe this. This is our variable data. This is our variable data, fault variable data, and this is the structure, fault structure we are throwing. Okay, now this fault structure caught by a catch branch. This catch branch is very specific to this fault because the catch branch we configured the fault name. This catch branch will not catch every fault. It will catch only invalid CC fault, and the catch branch has a variable. This variable stores the data. This variable stores the data. Okay. So now control goes to catch branch. How I want to prove that this variable stores the data. To prove that, I just made a mapping. I just copied the data from this fault variable, invalid CC fault variable. I did a mapping to my output variable. I want to prove that because in this variable, we did not made any mappings. Yes or no? I did not made any mappings. I did not loaded the data into this variable. But at runtime, this variable will be by default copied with the fault variable data. We are not copying the data. Okay, so whatever data already available in this fault variable is by default, it is going to copy into this catch branch variable. Catch branch, it must be a catch branch variable. The data cannot be copied into any variable. It must be the catch branch variable. Only in that case, the fault data will be copied into catch branch variable. To prove that, I just made this mapping. So the mapping executed here. Observe, once the mapping executed, we got the fault name. So what is the mapping? We are copying fault name field into our output variable. Okay, is it clear, sir? Now you can see, observe the result in the output. You can observe you got a body and you got the card validation system response, and we got the CC status as invalid CC fault because we handled the fault. Observe this use case, guys. We handled the fault. Okay, I mean, there is another way also we can do the same exception handling. Suppose, let's say, in this program, I want to raise the fault. And I want to send the fault signal back to the client. Here we are not sending the fault signal. Observe, we are sending normal response with a status. That's it. It's not a fault signal. Okay, suppose I want to send the fault signal back to my client. I don't want to send just a fault message. I want to send the fault signal. Yes, it is possible. What we need to do is, if you want to send a separate fault signal, in that case, you need to configure a replay activity with a fault message. Okay, I will show you what I mean. So as of now, you are clear how to raise the fault, how to catch the fault, and how smoothly we can stop the program. How smoothly we can stop the program with a meaningful message in the response. Okay, so this is how smoothly we can stop the program. But not just this, we can extend this concept by sending the fault signal back to the client. This is not fault signal. This is just a fault message. Observe the difference. I'm using two different keywords: fault message and fault signal. So this is a fault message, but I can also pass the fault signal. So what we need to do to pass the fault signal, we need to use a replay activity. We need to use a replay activity to pass the fault signal. For that, what I will do, see, this case is our success case, good case, happy flow, correct? This is our unhappy flow or the business fault flow. So the existing replay activity, I will keep into happy flow. See, I just dragged it from the global scope to specific branch. I just copied the replay activity to the specific branch. Okay, now I will configure one more replay activity, but this time my replay activity holds a fault signal, not the output variable. my reply activity. Now I'm going to configure a new reply activity, which is going to contains fault signal, not the output variable. Okay, let me configure the reply activity. Where is the reply activity? Partner link receive. Okay, let's do one thing. Right click on it, insert after. I want to use a replay activity. Done. No, it's not replay. I want replay. This is replay. Just right click on it, insert after. See guys, there are two activities, replay and this reply. Okay, we want reply. Just select the reply activity. Done. And create a partner link binding. Create a partner link binding. Done. Let me browse the variable. I can browse any variable, guys. You can browse any variable. Okay. But before browsing the variable, what I will do first, I want to browse the fault name. I mean, we want to send the fault signal as output, right? Whatever fault signal you want to send, that fault name you need to select. Fault signal. We want to send, we are not expecting the regular output. I am expecting a fault signal. Just select the fault signal, and the variable is your choice. I will select the fault variable itself. Invalid CC fault variable. Okay, I'm not using output variable. Observe, I'm not using output variable. Okay, I'm not using output variable, and this time I'm configuring a fault configuration. So guys, from your program, you want to send a fault signal as a response. That fault signal can be a business fault or it can be a system fault as well. It's your choice. I mean, as per your need, you need to do that. As of now, I am passing the business fault as the fault signal. You can also pass the system fault as the fault signal. It's your requirement. Okay. I will name it as replay fault. Okay. Done. So now what happened? We will deploy this program and observe what is the difference. What is the difference between earlier response and the current response? Okay. So let me deploy the code. Guys, let me deploy the code with the version 2.0. I want to say this as 2.0 because I want to show you the difference. Okay. Version 2.0, override if any program. Click next. Default. Or I will do one thing. I will go to test partition, not 2.0. I will change it as test partition. Okay. I will go to test partition. We have test partition, right? Click next and finish. So what I need to do, I need to get the URL from test partition. Because I want to show you both the programs. I don't want to lose the old code. So first time I deployed my card validation system into default folder, and second time I'm deploying my card validation system into test folder. Okay. Let's see the deployment. Deployment finished into test partition. Good. Just refresh your enterprise manager to get the latest service. Refreshed. Go to your card validation system, which is under test partition. Copy the endpoint. And now go to your SOAP UI. I want to test this project. Okay. New SOAP project. Local host. Okay. And this one you can give some naming convention. What I will do, card validation system test client. Okay. I'm just giving some naming convention. It's not really matter. You can give a meaningful name. That's it. Done. Okay. Save this. Always do a good practice. First, save the project. I want to save this project on my desktop. I have a folder called SOAP UI. I will save it. Done. Go to your test client. See, this is the test client. Okay. Same input is fine. Same input is fine for me. Okay. See, last time, what is the response you received? It's a normal output variable with the fault message. But now I'm expecting a fault signal. Observe. If I submit the request, see the output. See the output. What you got? You got the fault signal. You got the fault signal. Fault signal which contains fault code, fault string. Okay. And this is the data. The fault variable holds this data. See, it's not just output variable. Observe the difference. Okay, let me copy the response in a notepad file. See, consider both the responses, how they are different. Program is same, the logic is same, but the way how we handled the fault is different. The first case, we handled the fault and we copy the fault message in the output variable and it is over. But in the second case, we handled the fault, but we also passed the fault as our response, fault signal as our response. Observe this. This is the fault signal which contains fault code, fault string, and details. Fault code, fault string, and details. Under details section, your variable data, whatever your variable contains, that variable you can see here. Whatever the variable contains. Okay. Any questions as of now? Any questions? So by using reply activity, you can send a fault. As fault signal back to the client. Whoever is the client may be SOAP UI, client may be order processing system. Whoever is the client, you can send the fault signal back to the client. Okay. So, but the difference, you identify the difference. This is the normal response where we handled the error and just passed the fault message. But in this case, we have the control on the fault, but our intention is to pass the fault message, fault signal. It's not just fault message, it's the fault signal. Okay. Suppose if you, let me do one thing. In this reply activity, instead of invalid CC variable, let's assume I am using output variable. Okay. I'm using output variable. I want to browse the output variable. So then what happened? I browse the output variable, the same program. Then what happened here in this place, line number 14 to line number 18, instead of fault XML, I will get the output XML. Just observe the data. You need to do all these different practices, guys. What happened if we change the variable? Okay, let me deploy the code into my test server. Sorry, guys. I'm deploying my code into test folder. Okay. Okay, deployment finished. Now go to your SOAP UI, test the program which is in test folder, test partition. Okay, let me submit the request and see the XML. See the XML. We got the XML. Now go back to this. Okay, now observe the details section earlier and now. Details section holds the variable which you configured in the reply activity. The variable which you configured in the reply activity. Here is the variable, right? This is the variable what you configured. Okay, the variable what you configured, that data comes under details section. And the overall it is a fault signal. It's not the regular response. It's a fault signal. Are we good? Any questions as of now? Any questions from anyone?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Good. So this is how we need to define and throw and handle our business faults. Okay. So these are the steps you need to follow. I'm done with my business fault. Now what I want to do, let me commit my code changes. Even the previous session also we did not commit it, right? Let me commit everything. So this is how we need to handle the exception handling by using catch and catch all branch. And if you want to raise a fault, you need to use throw activity. Okay. Any questions for catch branch, catch all branch, and throw activity? Anyone? Anyone, if you have questions, you can ask me. Let me commit all the files. Card validation system people, I made the changes. Design time MDS, JPR not required here. Okay, JPR, let's select the JPR. Don't leave JPR anytime. This is, yes, XSD. I want to commit my XSD. And this is Vistal, which is an MDS. Order processing JPR, commit it. And order processing people, commit it. Billing system XSL file. And this is Vistal. Continue. Don't leave any required file, and at the same time, no need to commit any unwanted file. See, runtime fault whistle, we need it. Runtime fault whistle will be created when we configure the system fault. Okay. Anything else we need? Make sure you are not missing anything. MDS, file list, jar. JPG, XML log system. So no other important file we missed, right? And also I told you we need to save before we do the commit. We need to do save all. In your JDeveloper, click save all. Save all. Okay. Fine. Then practice with catch all, and throw activities. Practice with catch all, and throw activities. Done. I committed my code and I pushed the code into error handler branch. Okay, done. And then I need to merge my code into main branch. Git checkout main. So guys, this is the same step I'm doing for every feature branch, but I'm doing it for your understanding purpose. I mean, you need to do this practice. Okay. So what I need to do, git first pull the main branch, pull origin main, make sure your main branch is up to date. Okay. And then pull origin feature branch, feature slash error handler. Done. And then push your main branch. That's it. So I updated my main branch. Main branch is nothing but our production copy. I updated my main branch with proper data, proper code. Okay. So that's it for today about how to use catch all branches. So in the next session, we will talk about fault framework. So there are two different ways, right? We discussed exception handling by using BPEL activities, and there is another approach called fault framework. We'll talk about it. Okay. So that's a second part of our exception handling session. We completed first part. This is first part. We saw system faults, we saw business faults, we saw how to define a business fault. See the section, I mean the execution part. System fault, we no need to do anything how to raise the system fault. We are not doing anything for this. Okay, we don't configure anything in the code, but we need to handle the system fault. But for business fault, both we need to do how to raise the fault, how to handle the fault, both we need to take care. Okay. So that's it from my side, guys. I will stop the recording. You can ask me if you have any questions.